Okay, if you can, let's go ahead and start finding a place to sit, and we'll get started on the second session. While everyone's finding a place, we had one question earlier on the presentations, and we will post the presentations on the Tech at State website. It's just http tech.state.gov, and so you can look for any of the presentations there. Welcome back. This is Federal Government's Wikis number 2. Let me introduce you to Chris Bronk, who is going to do our moderation. Chris is a senior IT fellow at Rice University. He's a former Foreign Service officer. He worked in the Office of eDiplomacy when he was in the Foreign Service, and he still continues to advise us as an advisor to the Office of eDiplomacy. So I'll turn it over to Chris, and he'll introduce the rest of the panel.
Thanks, Tim. So the bios are on the website. We've got 3 really, I think, interesting counterparts in kind of maturity and scope and span of wikis. So Sean's going to talk about Intellipedia. Thomas is going to talk about Powerpedia, which is a new entrant into the field. And Tiffany Smith is going to talk about Diplopedia, which is near and dear to my heart. And with that, if we don't mind getting started, Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
The clicker is up there?
I assume there is a clicker up there.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Tim and Tech at State to be invited here. It's quite an honor to participate with Wikimania and to tell our story. As Chris mentioned, I'm Sean Dennehy. For the next 20 minutes, you'll have the unique opportunity of someone at the CIA talk to you about sharing. And I'm actually going to talk about kind of the intelligence community's experience with MediaWiki as well as other collaborative tools. But first, I want to start off with some statements. And for those who can't read the statements, I'll read them off for you. But I want to, as you read these statements, do you guys come in contact with these statements as you work in your day-to-day business practices, whether in government, whether in business. And the first one is insist on doing everything in channels, never permit shortcuts to expedite decisions. When possible, refer all matters to committees for further study and consideration. Haggle over precise wordings of communications. I'm an analyst at CIA. We do a lot of haggling over precise wordings. Advocate, quote unquote, caution. Be reasonable and urge your fellow conferees to be reasonable and avoid haste, which might result in embarrassments. Question whether a decision lies within the jurisdiction of the group or whether it might conflict with the policy of some higher echelon. Usually I kind of ask people where this comes from. It's probably not as conducive an effort of an atmosphere to do that. But just kind of a show of hands, how many people kind of can relate to what's on this thing? And so that's pretty much a majority of you. And most people, when I ask where do these come from, a lot of people are like standard operating procedures, policy, lawyers. So it might be interesting where you think where these actually came from. And this is a little bit of a history lesson. The predecessor organization to the CIA was called the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS. It was established in the wake of Pearl Harbor and existed throughout World War II. And in 1944, they published a manual called the Simple Sabotage Field Manual. And it was a short pamphlet, as the things were in those days, about 40 pages long. Talked about everything sabotaging shipyards, rail yards, lines of communications. But the last section, which was really interesting, which you'll see on the right, is general interference with organizations and production. And if you start reading through this, you'll see all those statements that I just related to you, as well as many more statements that perhaps you can relate to as well. So what happened here? This is what we were going to tell someone. The OSS was going to tell someone if you can penetrate an organization, or if you're in an organization, here's how you make the organization ineffective. Yet by a show of hands, everyone can relate to these statements. What happened here? So that's, and that document is actually available on the internet. If you Google OSS Simple Sabotage Manual, Again, CIA, we're all about sharing. We'll put that out on the internet and make it available, so you can find that there. And the reason I bring this up is really twofold. One is we actually rediscovered this document because of Intellipedia and the other social tools available to the intelligence community. A young employee in kind of a small unit within CIA was handed this document. Actually, it was in some squirreled away shared drive or a proprietary database. And he actually brought it out and hosted it on our out on our blogs and blog that we had Don Burke blog about it. And so all of a sudden, we because of the software that we have allows us to track how many times the document is being downloaded. In 2008, when we stumbled across this document, we could actually see that it was being downloaded about 400 times a day internally. So it's very likely that this document was having more effect in 2008 and today than it did actually back in 1944. The second reason I want to talk about this document is it dovetails nicely with the start of Intellipedia, which was in 2004. There was an internal competition within the intelligence community where people could write papers about innovation and how we could innovate as a community to meet the challenges of the 21st century. And one of the winners of that first competition, which has been called the Galileo Awards and is still run today, was a colleague of mine, Calvin Andrus, who wrote a paper called The Wiki and the Blog. And because it was called The Wiki and the Blog, everyone focused on, oh, it's all about technology, and kind of avoided the subtitle, which was Towards a Complex Adaptive Intelligence Community. And this was basically, Cal's premise was giving people the ability to act. A lot of when you read this paper, also available online, again, we're sharing. And so if you read a lot of what Cal's the premise is kind of getting beyond what was outlined in that simple sabotage manual. So back in 2005, when Cal came and presented this to a group of analysts, I among many were skeptical. I mean, I think it's just human nature to be skeptical of any type of new initiative. But then I actually went out and looked at Wikipedia back in 2005 and saw what was happening on article pages, people building references to original sources. I saw what was happening on discussion pages where people were challenging each other about what was the validity of that source, and I saw the direct parallels to what I was doing as an analyst at CIA. So that's when I went back to Cal and said we should probably let's investigate this a little further. Both Cal and I were at CIA, but what we did was Cal had the foresight to actually go to a small unit called IntelLink that provides services for the intelligence community. And sure enough, the smart folks at IntelLink had already read Cal's paper, and they were getting ready to deploy a wiki for the community. And we worked with them. I became the pilot customer within Mission to kind of become their evangelist for this new technology. And so that's where we got started. But what I would say is, and again, I think it was mentioned earlier by Ryan in the previous presentation, it's not all about the wiki. I know this is Wikimania. That might be, some people might take offense to that. But it's about a suite of tools that have been made available to the U.S. intelligence community over the last 5 to 6 years, where we have kind of looked at what works on the internet. And let's bring that in and see if it can help us do our job in informing policymakers. So we have Intellipedia, which is based on MediaWiki, same code as Wikipedia. We have blogs, which is based on WordPress, another open source platform. We have eChirp, which is kind of our internal version of Twitter, which is based on StatusNet. So a lot of the tools that have been available or made available are based on open source code. So we're trying to do this at minimal cost to the taxpayer. And in fact, I think we've actually done it kind of on a shoestring budget over the last several years. So we're bringing all of these tools in that will make the internet work. But we're not the internet. And that's the important thing to take away, is that whether you bring these things into a government organization or into a business, it's not exactly the same effect. You can't expect the same thing to happen. As Ryan said, you just can't build it and they will come. But through our initial stumbling and initial successes through Intellipedia in the first couple months and years, my colleague Don Burke and I came up with 3 core principles that we felt were really important to kind of communicate to the community about how to best utilize these tools. And you'll notice that these core principles are also kind of countercultural, just like Cal's paper was. So I'll walk through them very briefly. One is to work at the broadest audience, obviously countercultural in an intelligence community or where we're dealing with secret information. However, how the intelligence community works and how a lot of different organizations work is you have access to perhaps a broad network, but then you also have accesses to very small enclosed networks. And what we've found is that Intellipedia was at that broad network. So we were encouraging people to work at the broadest network possible, which was Intellipedia. But realizing that both Don and I and many other folks who were advocating the use of these tools, realizing that not everything could be shared at the broadest audience. So what we would encourage in that aspect is start an article where you would just have a base camp of information, of generic information, but then also provide a link or what we would call a breadcrumb to the more sensitive data. And that sensitive data could be in a proprietary database. It could be just a link saying, for more information, call John. And so it was ability to put that information out so the entire audience could see it, but also realize that audience, if they came across that article, they would be able to see and say, well, I don't have access to everything here. There's more data out there. And that's an important lesson that we need to come away with, is that there is always more data out there. The second principle that we talked about, which also was a challenge that we needed to overcome, which is think topically vice organizationally. And so once we got people to work out on Intellipedia, we would see people kind of rush out there and they'd create agency XYZ page on Fidel Castro. Okay, well, we've got this nice, new canvas that we can kind of rethink our processes, and we're running in and we're setting up the same stovepipes. And why do we do this? Well, I think this is natural within any organization, that you want your organization to get credit for that page. There's some sense that, well, this is going to be our page, and and that way we'll keep everyone else off our page. So we had to kind of fight that mentality. And I think we've been relatively successful, not completely successful, but this is a journey that we're on. And what we've often encouraged people to do is work at the broadest audience, think topically, focus on just call the page Fidel Castro, capture that information, and then if you want to get your organization credit, put it at the bottom of the page saying contributions to this page were provided by XYZ organization, ABC organization, and then be able to link to those organizational pages, which also exist within Intellipedia. The last thing, and probably the most important, I think it was touched on the last panel as well, is to replace existing processes. You can throw all these tools out on a network and expect people to be able to just kind of jump in there and start using them, but they won't. People are busy. People are busy with doing their day-to-day work, and they can't just, if they add, and we've had so many people come up to us over the years say, oh yeah, I'm really going to start a blog. But what happens is they get through their day-to-day work and it's 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30. Yeah, I didn't get to the blog today. Why? Because they're doing their normal day-to-day business. They're trapped in email. They're trapped in meetings. And so what we've talked about is look at what's in your email. If you're having a long debate in email, take the contents of that email, move it out to a blog, move it out to a discussion page in the wikis, move those processes out into these tools. And we've had some effect, good effect with that. And that's just especially because I think almost everyone can agree that we have email overload. And when you start moving into these tools, you still get email, but they're just a notification that you can throw away. And then all of the content, the rich content that you want to preserve, are captured in these tools. So then we had to look, we've also been asked many times, how do you measure success? And we looked at a lot of the metrics that are available. page views, number of edits, number of users, and we found them to be somewhat lacking. Sure, there are good measures, but they don't tell the whole story. And they don't really get into the aspect that we really thought was important, which was the socialness of those tools. So we kind of came up with three measures that we thought were very effective for our implementation of these tools. The first one, which is vibrancy. And my colleague Don Burke, again, I'll continue to reference him again, came up with this great analogy. It's you have a party, right? Whenever any one of us go to a party, the minute you walk into the party, you know whether you want to stay there or whether you want to head for the door after one drink. And that's exactly what what vibrancy gets to. Is it the place to be? Are people going there? So that's, some of those metrics about, number of users, number of contributions and everything kind of feeds into that vibrancy. Is it the place to be? Are people going there? And it's tangible. You can kind of feel it when you're going in. It's a little fuzzy, but you can get some of the metrics to measure it. The second aspect of it is socialness, which is at the bottom here. And so what we wanted to look at was, are people really engaging each other in these tools? Are there discussion, does each article have a discussion tab? Is there discussion on this? Are people engaging each other in the blogs? Are people responding to each other's chirps? And essentially that was really important because we've seen some instances of social media within our enterprise where they've pretty much, it's become a posting board. It's become very Web 1.0. Here, our PowerPoint slides are on the Wiki. Okay, well that's one way to use a wiki, but that's not really, you're not getting that socialness aspect that we feel is really very important with these tools. So in order to kind of get to that next level, that's what we wanted to look at. And the last one is relevance. We had a number of tools internally that had vibrancy, had social, a lot of people were on the system, a lot of people were engaging in discussion, but they were discussing sports scores or whatever the latest media hype it was, and not really talking about the mission. And so we do believe that there needs, with any of these tools, there has to be a sense of play, but there has to be a balance between the kind of the sense of play and then actually using these tools to get work done and accomplish the mission. And then lastly, I'll walk through a couple of these myths and lessons learned, and then I'll turn the time back over and we can kind of get into more of these in the Q&A session. But first off, and again, the myths, and these are very strong myths, it's a free-for-all. And I think Ryan touched on this in his last presentation. You can roll out the red carpet, but doesn't necessarily mean people are going to come. And so, but what we found is that, especially because each edit is attributable to a person's username or person's name, a lot of times a person's name basically affects their reputation. And a lot of times the reputation is your calling card within an organization. So you don't want a lot of negative street cred associated with your username. So that actually kind of encourages people to be a little bit more collegial, a little bit more professional, rather than kind of seeing a lot of the rants and raves. This is about the youth or net generation. We hear this all the time, and it's completely incorrect. We have not, there are some folks that are starting to enter in our workforce that have kind of grown up with Wikipedia and stuff like, and these social tools. But for the most part, one of the number one contributors to Intellipedia was 69 years old. He was a 40-year veteran of the Central Intelligence Agency, and he was taking stuff out of his hard copy files and creating electronic files in Intellipedia. And when we talked to him about it, he's like, "Oh, I'm addicted to it." And so, and we joke about that, but he actually, it became just this addiction for him because it allowed him, he knew he was about to retire, so it was going to give him kind of a legacy to be able to capture a lot of this information that we'd even have electronic versions of a lot of these files. So for him to put that out there was very successful. On the other hand, so we had, again, it's more of a mindset than whether it's generational. On the other hand, we bring in young folks into our organization. What do? First off, what they want to fit in. So they're going to do whatever it takes to fit in. And you bring them into an organization where, well, these are relatively new tools. We pair them up with a mentor who got promoted and based on the old system. And the mentor basically looks at these tools and say, well, don't bother with that. Focus on getting this product out the door. And that's what's going to get you promoted. And that's what, again, we bring in junior people and they want to blend in, they want to fit in, they want to get promoted. So they don't necessarily gravitate towards these tools, although some of them are starting to more actively use them. Some of our lessons learned that obviously start small. We started, and as Ryan mentioned again with GCpedia, there wasn't like a big announcement. There wasn't a push from higher management. It basically just kind of went quietly online, and we started working on it. And actually what happened is we actually had the blogs before we had the wiki. And what happened was we were still kind of kicking the tires. Chris Musilek, who was the first system administrator for the Intellipedia, was in the audience. And we were going back and forth basically saying, okay, well, this works, this page doesn't display properly. And all of a sudden, we get this blog post saying, hey, everybody, look, it's Intellipedia. This is what we've been waiting for. And we're like, no, stop. It's not ready yet because all the pages weren't, we had to adjust people's proxy settings. In some cases, it was just a complete a mess. But it turned out that those people that were initially on the blogs were obviously some of our early adopters, and they kind of helped get the party started and do a lot of that groundwork. But it was very in the early days of Intellipedia, it was about 20 or 30, 40 of us that were kind of hacking away at it from various parts of the organization. That's actually how I met Don Burke, was through the wiki. And so it was just like, hey, we should probably meet sometime. we were editing a lot of the same pages. So, and then the one that might kind of stick out as kind of odd is this be selfish. I thought you were talking about sharing and, we're collaborating. But actually what we found is a lot of people that have never taken a course, on how to use these tools, but they've just kind of gravitated towards these tools to say, this is how I'm going to capture my information. And this is where I'm going to be, because they found that these tools are much more effective at capturing their information than what they were doing prior, which was primarily working in Excel spreadsheets or Word documents or whatever. And so one of our, kind of key first users basically came in and said that, and I was kind of taken aback, but he really viewed it as, this is how I organize my information, but because he's working on the platform, everyone benefits. And so he viewed it as, well, I can put my information out there. If I get other people from other agencies, which he has been able to kind of contribute as well, then that's a bonus. But this is just where I'm going to work. So I'll talk a little bit. I'll be available for questions afterwards, and I'll turn it back to Chris and the panel.
Thanks a lot, Sean. And now I'll turn it over to Thomas O'Neill to talk about Powerpedia, and he'll probably indicate some links between other wikis in government, I would assume. So, thank you, Tom.
Hello. My name is Tom O'Neill, and I work for the Department of Energy, and I'm actually fairly recent to convert to the wiki, thanks to Don Burke, also of Intellipedia fame. Powerpedia is DOE's internal wiki. It is also built on MediaWiki, which all of you are very familiar with. We do not have any sensitive data, and is for all employees, including everybody at our national labs and all of our sites. It was originally established as basically something focused on states, part of the Recovery Act as State Wiki. In January of 2010, it was officially blessed by senior leadership, and that's quite different than other It sounds like the other wikis, a lot of them were grassroots organizations. Ours was actually, in many ways, initiated from the top. And it was officially stood up during Snowmageddon. And that's a photo from Wikipedia. Fortunately, I was not able to join the festivities. I only heard afterwards, but looks like they had a great time. We also have, due to the fact that after Don, after they had Don and his colleague won the Sammy Award, he was quickly identified by our now chief of staff as a very knowledgeable individual, and he was brought over to DOE to help us get our wiki going. And he has also brought over a lot of what he did in Intellipedia. And so we also use similar methods to measure our success: the vibrancy, the socialness, and the relevance. As I said, Powerpedia is available to everybody at DOE, and that includes our 17 national labs and all of our field sites. This is quite unique. DOE is incredibly diverse, and there are so many different sites and different organizations that there is no collaboration space other than Powerpedia that people can share their different silos of information. And we are fairly new, and we are just getting started, and so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more and more of those labs get involved and start sharing their information and all our different sites. One of the first major processes that we were able to move into Powerpedia was the DOE Weekly Report. And this, as I indicated before, is since DOE does have the support of senior leadership, we have been able to move processes very successfully, much to the credit of Don, into Powerpedia. And this is one of those many processes we've moved in. And it's basically a living history. We're still in the infant stages of fully using it, but it is there, and it's continuing to be viewed, and it goes back to November of 2009. This is another example. We have Wi-Fi being distributed throughout the department, and the development of that is being tracked exclusively on Powerpedia. And another huge win was Admiral Williams, who's our Associate Deputy Secretary, has also been a big supporter in addition to the Chief of Staff. And he has encouraged his staff to move different processes into Powerpedia. And one of those processes is the Management and Operational Excellence. And that is basically extremely transparent and completely, exclusively being tracked through Powerpedia. And it's definitely being viewed tremendously, and there's lots of edits. We are also developing our ways of increasing the socialness. One of the main things we have borrowed from Wikipedia is the idea of user badges, or user boxes. And as you can see here, here's a few that have been created. We are also in the initial stages of trying to create our own version of a Barn Star to get people to also award fellow editors. And we have a working group that is is hoping to fill Don's shoes now that he has returned to his home duty station. And we're very excited, and we have a lot of people who are very dedicated to the tool, and the working group spans many organizations, and I feel that in the coming years it will be extremely powerful in helping us to maintain Wiki, the Wiki as a powerful force within the department. And I have great hopes for our continued development now that we have basically spread our wings and left, Don has left us. Our talk pages are increasingly being used. We have a very active set of interns who are being extremely effective in transforming the culture of their different organizations. One of them, two of them in fact, are actually starting to host training sessions for their fellow counterparts, and completely, as far as I know, completely of their own volition. So I think we're definitely getting more and more people excited, and people are going more and more to Powerpedia. And one of the main things, actually, one of our top pages is our acronyms page. As any government agency, we are in love with our acronyms, and so if we can find a way to make an acronym, we do. And so this is an excellent way to sort of group that all together and not only provide what the acronym means, but also eventually create a topic page on that so that that information can be shared. Our registered users continue to increase. We recently celebrated our second birthday, and that was in January. At that time, we had 73,000 edits and 750,000 page views. About 6 months later, we've hit our 100,000th edit, and we're over 1 million page views. So it's really taking off, and we're continue to be excited about the future. We also we have started to implement, thanks to the M&OE process that Admiral Williams undertook, a bot system. It's still in its infancy, and we hope to grow that. Our total page views are increasing. Of course, average daily edits are also slowly growing, as with page views. We also have inherited the 3 core principles from Intellipedia, and we're very grateful for all of the work and all of the knowledge that we've been able to inherit from Intellipedia. And we continue to hope to build on that. We're working on building on what you're doing, the Wikipedia community is doing, especially with the visual editor. And I think that once that available to the community, I think that it will be really a force to be reckoned with, and the Wiki will become even more powerful. We are excited about the collections extension that allows us to export PDFs from multiple pages, and unfortunately we're still working on trying to get that initiated or established in our environment, and we hope that at some point they will be actually integrated into the core Media Wiki software, but we see that especially could be a really powerful tool to bring more manuals and content over into Powerpedia. And unfortunately, we did, as part of the upgrade to 1.18, we did lose Who Is Watching, and that was a very powerful tool. My understanding from management, they really like to be able to see who is actually interested in following a page and being able to see what edits are being made. So we'd love to see if that could be resurrected or brought back to life. That's about it. I'm going to turn the remainder back over to the moderator. Thanks, Tom.
And thank you very much, Tom. Next to present is a co-conspirator of mine, Tiffany Smith. Be kind to her, please.
Go ahead.
Yeah. How about it?
Good morning. So just to get started, I know that when we're sitting here, sometimes it starts to feel a little bit kind of like you've just sat and watched us talk a lot. So I'm hoping for a little bit of audience participation. From our room, who aligns more closely with government right now? And raise your hand, perfect. Or stand up if you really need to stand up, because this is a good chance. Okay. And who aligns more closely with Wikimania? All right, lots of familiar faces. And who aligns with both? Nice. Okay, I'm one of those that actually aligns with both. I should tell you, eDiplomacy has actually participated in 4 of the past 7 Wikimanias. And so I'm really excited to share what we're doing with Tech at State and the Wikimedia community today. And I'm not sure if everyone in this room saw it, but I'm going to ask for a round of applause in a second. English Wikipedia actually topped 4 million pages just about an hour ago. So that's pretty exciting. And we really do learn a lot from our community and from the Wikimedia community. And so this is a good chance to get to talk with everyone. And so what I'm going to talk about today is Diplopedia at the U.S. Department of State. And so considering that we're a pretty diverse audience, which is great, I'm actually going to go pretty big and then come down into a pretty granular level in terms of Diplopedia. So first, the Department of State. You should know about it to know about Diplopedia. There are about 60,000 personnel at nearly, or over actually, 260 posts around the world. And our job, is to support American citizens overseas, coordinate activities at our missions worldwide, and we're responsible for leadership of the foreign policy process. And so to understand how we're using technology today, it's important to understand our history. And if you will. Yeah. So this article, if you can't read it, it says, diplomats must typewrite. And it's from the Christian Science Monitor in September of 1912. So 100 years later, we have come a long way, I'm happy to say. And what it was an initiative to ensure that our personnel, domestically and around the world, would be able to use, at that point, some pretty new technology to be able to do their jobs more effectively. And the work that our office does is really consistent with that today. We were founded, the Office of eDiplomacy, as a task force first in 2002 and then converted into a formal office in 2003. So we're just coming up on our 10th anniversary. And we actually have a pretty wide-ranging mission, and it's grown also in 10 years. It started with figuring out how to develop the knowledge leadership strategy, and to do that, we actually talked with some of the organizations you see on the stage in front of you, as well as many other federal government and private sector organizations, to figure out how people were handling knowledge and within organizations. But what we're doing now, I guess, is actually our mission or our vision is innovative diplomacy powered by knowledge leadership, superior customer support, and collaborative technology solutions. So all of those little panels you see on that slide identify some sort of project or platform that supports those goals. Collaborative technology is a really big umbrella, and Tech at State is part of that. As well as a number of other initiatives that go beyond our firewalls to some of the questions that have been asked over the past 2 days. So for instance, you today can go to techcampglobal.org and participate in a public wiki that has to do with solving real global civil society organizations' data challenges. And that's something that's been around for a while, but a lot of folks might not know about it. And it's something we really do invite you to participate in and learn from and engage with, and really help us help the world, hopefully. You can also join with us on Twitter at Tech at State and at eDip at State, and some of you have been doing that already. And thanks to Bob Watts for ensuring that we have a well-curated Twitter stream over the past 2 days. And what I'm going to focus on out of all of those different things, though, is the knowledge leadership, which has to do more with the internal activities. So, knowledge leadership. The overall goal is to enable State Department personnel to access and share knowledge anywhere at any time, and increasingly from any mobile device. And how that works is that we want through a number of key components. So Diplopedia and Search, for us, work together really closely. And then we also want folks, of course, to collaborate across organizational and geographic boundaries. We have a program called Communities at State that does that, as well as identify and benefit from expertise and experience. And we have something called Corridor that does that. So if some of you heard the GCpedia presentation earlier this morning, to us, knowledge leadership, it really is important that there's an integrated suite of tools that tie together to support those goals. And the other piece, and this is something that Sean and Tom also both mentioned, was that technology access should make knowledge sharing part of the daily workflow. For us, that's really where it's worked, and it's where it's going to continue to work over the next few years. And now Diplopedia. So this was Diplopedia, the main page of it a few days ago. You'll see the highlight of Tech at State right there on the main page. And I'm going to go into a lot of different aspects of Diplopedia over the next few minutes, but just so you get a general sense of what our personnel look at when they look at Diplopedia. And it's the State Department's internal online wiki for foreign affairs information. It's a collaborative encyclopedia. Some of our principles are close to Wikipedia or Intellipedia. Some of them are a little bit different. And the real key tenet is the idea that information on Diplopedia should be related to persistent, evolving knowledge. And knowledge does change over time. We learn a lot. We learn from our history, the way that we learn about diplomats have to typewrite. And we also learn together and collaboratively. I'm going to spend a little more time talking about that today. It also has to be a lightweight, flexible platform for us because we have people dispersed so globally. We need to make sure that it is lightweight. And in our case, we use MediaWiki because it's a pretty lightweight tool, and for a number of other reasons. So it's an open repository. Everyone with access to our intranet, which is called OpenNet, can read it and edit it. We do ask people to log in when they contribute because that helps us make sense of who's doing what. And it's really about building this community ownership. The other principle is that the information on Diplopedia is informative and deliberative, not necessarily authoritative. So for the Wikimedians in the crowd, that means that we don't have citation rules, for instance. I believe it when Diplopedia tells me that HR stands for human resources. I don't necessarily need something that tells me why it says that. And that's sort of the general case for the way that the government employees can work together when we're inside our own little world. So, growth. I was actually really, really impressed with Powerpedia. You guys have grown so quickly, and it's really impressive. And our line has been really pretty linear, as you saw earlier in Peter Meyer's talk. So we have now more than 5,400 registered editors and 16,100 articles, which is exciting, as well as about 40,000 page views per week and 230,000 cumulative page edits. And so one of the things that the few moments actually in the linear graph you see where it kind of flattens out a little bit with total articles or even total editors, because this is going from May 2007 to present, basically. The point that Ryan made earlier about the trough of disillusionment is something that I think we did sort of experience maybe about a year and a half ago. There was sort of a little bit of, okay, now we need to re-energize folks again and show them why what's there makes sense. And I think we're now on the slope of enlightenment, which I'm very excited about. So, collaborative sense-making. So Diplopedia is really quickly becoming the go-to resource for useful information in rapidly evolving foreign affairs and institutional issues. And so what you see up here are actually 3 different examples of that, ranging from things that are somewhat more mundane and bureaucratic but important to things that are really relevant crisis information. So up at the top, that's actually something you'll see on our main page. It's a template. And it's for state bureaus and offices. And that's really important when you work in a bureaucracy, is to understand who reports to who and how. In the past few years, we've been working with the Quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review, and one of their recommendations, and one of the things that the State Department has been carrying out to improve effectiveness, had to do with bureau reorganizations. So some bureaus were renamed, other ones were sort of moved from one place to another, and all of that really helps to make sure that lines of communication in the State Department make sense. That is really easy for people that work in those bureaus. Despite change management issues, they know what their bureau is becoming and when it's becoming. But if you're working with those people, you need to have a resource to be able to find out if you're trying to get, is it EEB to clear on something or ENR? That sentence made perfect sense to me and probably not to anyone else in this room except for my eDiplomacy colleagues. But what we did, and what Eric Brazel, who is backstage, really helped shepherd through, was making sure that that information was really clear all the time and it was up to date throughout the process and remains up to date as further things change in the State Department. It just makes work easier and better overall. The Religion and Global Affairs report was something actually about 2 years ago, and I believe it was in about a 6-week time frame. Our Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor was asked to create a report from all global posts overseas that had to do with religious engagement. And that can be difficult in old processes when we talk about email sending and things like that, and actually clearing who's done what and does it all make sense together at the end of the day, and what ended up being a 640-page report. So what they did was set up a portal on Diplopedia and make sure that it was really easy for people to be able to submit information, see what other folks were doing around the world at the same time to make sure that all of it was consistent as it was going in. And they got it done and everyone was happy, and it's a good report. The last one is something that is really critical, and it's something that's really where the State Department often shines, is in crisis response. And one of those instances most recently was with the Japan 2011 earthquake. So you don't see much of the content on that page, but what happened with it was that lots of information, anytime there's a big international sort of disaster or crisis, comes at different employees, and lots of it is available and unclassified to all personnel. But it can be a little tricky to figure out what's the most recent piece of information, and where should I go for this piece of authoritative information. So Diplopedia in those instances can serve as the place where people go to find out just the list of the stuff and when it happened and what's most up to date. And that's something that we do try to support when it happens, and it's helped a lot. One of the other things I want to talk about just a little bit briefly is post reports. And what these are guides to diplomatic missions, embassies, and consulates in the cities and countries that host them. And they're this catch-all summary of life at post. They're useful for personnel considering an assignment overseas. And just for context, our Foreign Service personnel tend to shift positions every 1 to 4 years. So they do actually kind of want to think about where they're going next. As well as anyone wishing to learn more about a country and the State Department's presence there. Historically, they were printed in these really nice, glossy sort of reports that people would be able to grab and take home and show their families and things like that. But what we've learned is that maybe people didn't always update those glossy reports, and they were moved to a more static repository about 10 years ago. So what we've been doing this summer, and this is an innovation by one of my amazing colleagues and supported by many of my amazing colleagues, we have a really good team in eDiplomacy, is helping to migrate these to Diplopedia. And what that does is it allows for a fluid, really dynamic sense of content, making sure that things are up to date when things change. It makes it a little bit easier to use instead of having to log into a system and make sure that things are specific. And it also provides mobile access to the information. So if you're on a department-issued mobile device, you can actually access this information and show it to someone who needs it while you're in country or considering visiting. So, motivation and community management. I'm going to go back to that team that I just talked about a few seconds ago. We have a really, really good team, and they just amaze me on a regular basis. It's fantastic to work with them. So, knowledge leadership, right? It's embedding in the workflow means that the information that we deal with is integrated. And we try to make it a welcoming environment. So Linda Green is our project lead, and she really sort of helps shape this elegance and grace of coordinating with our community, as well as a few other folks that are here or watching elsewhere. including Eric Brazel and Louisa O'Neill, who regularly welcome contributors with that fantastic little lady giving them a chocolate chip cookie on their talk page. But what the sort of experience for our users is, you can kind of see here, and it looks a little like a puzzle, but it makes sense when you're inside the system. Generally, a lot of people come to Diplopedia because they search. And it's the same as people come to maybe Wikipedia because they search. And so say you're looking for 5FAM 777. I happen to know that because it happens to be the Foreign Affairs Manual section that governs the use of collaboration tools inside the Department of State. You can look it up online, it's publicly available. But 5FAM 777 can be a little tricky, and they might want to learn a little bit more about what the FAM is and what collaboration tools are and things like that. They might not know to type that in exactly. So Diplopedia, they come to the kind of this page on the left with some page inside Diplopedia, and they'll see that information. And if they think there's something wrong, then generally, as we know, that tends to be when people start to edit a wiki. They actually have two options, and this is something really, really cool that Kendall Church, who is our guru developer, put together, is the See Errors or Outdated Content block right at the very bottom on the left-hand side. And below it, it says, Fix it if you can, and that's a link to the Diplopedia help portal you see on the right, and tell us if you can't. And that is actually an email link that sends us the title and the URL for the article on the Diplopedia Diplopedia support team. And then we'll actually go back with that person and either help show them how they can do it, or sometimes if it's a really quick, urgent thing, we'll do it for them. But then we also give them sort of a cue that they can do that themselves in the future. And that, in terms of community management, is really, really helpful in terms of getting people on board and welcoming folks in. In my perspective, and I'll just editorialize for one moment, I think government is responsible to our citizens to do the absolute best work possible. And access and the capacity to share information is really important for that success. So with Diplopedia, in coordination with these other knowledge leadership initiatives, it really supports that effort. So motivation, it's not necessarily for us something where we have to do a whole lot of bling. It ends up being sort of instead, here's how this fits in with your work, here's why your work matters, here's how it all ties together. And that makes life actually a little bit easier, I think, for community management inside the department. And so enhancements, because we do ask people to be responsible and we ask people to work together well, we also then offer them these different things that make their lives easier. And one of them is something that John Weisham actually talked to you about at an Ignite session yesterday that we're really excited about. What it is actually something that will help augment our search capability inside MediaWiki. And so it can make sort of searching easier via a mobile device and also help people sort of sort and understand categories and titles together. So that is it for me. Thank you very, very much for listening, and I think I will now return to the panel.
So I'll conclude. So I turned in this abstract to the Wikimania 2012 program committee months and months ago about wikis and bureaucracy and horizontal versus vertical. And I'm not going to talk about any of that because why not? I want to tell a couple stories. I'll start with a phone call from my wife last night, and she said, "How is Wikimania 2012 different than the last one you attended?" So I went to, and I haven't been to one of these since 2006. The reason I went to Wikimania 2006 was simple. The then General Counsel of the Wikimedia Foundation said we needed all sorts of documentation from the Wikimedia Foundation about the software so it could be approved to run on the State Department network. And this was stuff they weren't going to prepare for anybody. They didn't have to. And had we known better, we probably could have used an exemption to not get it. But things that the software complied with certain federal regulations and rules. And the General Counsel at the time said, "I'd be glad to gin up that documentation for you. But you'll need to come to Wikimania to talk about what you're doing." And that was a very frightening prospect because we didn't know if it would work. We thought it might fail, but he said, "Come anyway." Fine. Wikimania 2006, and there are a few people I've seen who were there. I mean, there are a lot of people who are still coming to these Wikimanias who were there. It was a really singular event, I think, in the Wikimania or the Wikipedia, Wikimedia community. it was the beginning, a couple weeks before Stephen Colbert had coined his truthiness, and it might have even been a couple days before, and that was like the punchline of Jimmy Wales' keynote speech. But I only much later on realized how important that conference was. I'm getting to a point. In the last couple of years, I had Ben Schneiderman, who was here yesterday. Ben's a professor in human-computer interface at University of Maryland, College Park. And Ben came and visited, and also Dale Meyerrose, who some of you who worked in the Intel field probably know of. Dale was the Chief Information Officer for the Director of National Intelligence's office. And what I didn't realize, and we hosted talks for them. I'm at a university most of the time, and we hosted their talks. And when you host a talk, you get to go, host a talk in Houston, you get to go out for margaritas the night before or the night after. And that's really where you have the fun about the talk. And both of them, we bored down into, why are you interested in this social human-computer thing? And, first it was Ben. He said, yeah, I went to this conference in Boston. It was really weird. And Ben's, a very mature professor. I mean, he's a full prof. He's probably in his 60s. And I said, why did you change angles so radically at that point in your career to go to social software from human-computer interface? He said, I went to this conference up at Harvard that the Wikipedia people put on, and it was so exciting. And then a couple nights later, Dale Meyerrose was kind of looking at me like, weirdo academic, why am I talking to you? Why am I here? And he really opened up. I said, you were at the DNI when all this was happening. Why did we start getting permission to do things across the federal government? Why did the intelligence agencies start happening? He said, well, there was a lot of bottom up, but a whole bunch of our people went to this conference up in Boston. That it was at Harvard. It was weird, and I went. It was really exciting. And this is interesting now because we're at a very different point in Wikipedia's life, and the wiki as an instrument for human communication, capacity building, the development of structures. Wikipedia is not new. Wikimedia is not new. All these wikis, Powerpedia is the new guy, but they're coming along really quick. The problem for the wiki world now is not one of being a startup, but being a mature enterprise. And how that is dealt with will tell a lot. The thing I have to say as an academic is, it galls me to a sense that, no university came up with something nearly as cool as Wikipedia or the MediaWiki software. They tried. OpenCourseWare at MIT, connections at my home institution, Rice. Pretty remarkable construct. Now think about that in application to government. That this independent aggregation of people under the banner of what is the term we use in open source projects? A benevolent despot. That has evolved to become a consistent top 10 website in the world, the center of information exchange on general knowledge. The encyclopedia is lost. 6 years ago it was the debate, well, how inaccurate is Britannica versus Wikipedia? Well, they're not even playing anymore at Britannica. They're out. It's over. So the question that I have on this Wikireaucracy thing, and Beth Novick really made some solid points yesterday. And it's this, how do we get people to participate in government more widely? And then there's the rebuttal question, do they really want to anyway? But we have this issue now that we want to open information to people in an ad hoc basis, but also conserve. These are paradoxical problems. The culture issues of communicating back and forth are paradoxical. Chris Musilek is here, and Chris and I used to sit on the Wiki engineering group. I was the State Department guy, and he is one of the intelligence agency people. And the culture differences were so radical then. The State Department guys, we'd show up in our pinstripe suits, and the agency guys would show up in turtlenecks, and the DIA guys would show up in their polo shirts with their big muscles. And then there were two guys from the NSA who would come, and they wouldn't say a word, and they were just pale, and they looked very young, and they didn't have to shave yet, and they probably got a ride in a station wagon or a minivan. And one of them had pi represented on his shirt to the nth digit in 10-point Courier font. And we argued. we had really nasty knockdown, drag-out arguments because we were so radically different. And then the NSA guys would leave and say, we'll consult with our superiors and we'll be back, to say nothing. So that's where government wikis came from. Where are they going? The big challenge now is, I was talking with the GCpedia chap. They have a network for their whole government. What a luxury. We don't. And here's the big thing, and this is, let me just, do I have anything else I wanted to say? I think I had 2 notes that I wanted to make. Yeah, my rebuttal to Beth is this. Not that she's here. So, Wikipedia is part of an information revolution. I'll pause at that, right? Okay. This information revolution, I will argue, Mike Bishton and I had a great discussion, one of the godfathers of eDiplomacy, yesterday, on how big the information revolution is. So let's assume this is as big as the printing press. The printing press was a variable in the reconstruction of a world radically different from the Dark Ages. Where, before the printing press, information was immensely scarce and almost unobtainable. After the printing press, information became less scarce but expensive. Now, thanks to the information revolution, the microchip, microprocessor, networking, really, information is plentiful, but attention is scarce. How will those forces, if you think about the changes of the Enlightenment, democracy, the development of industry, things you can blame to some degree on the more widely available set of information that came from the printing press. What does this mean for government? I don't have a simple answer other than I posit that it may be an incredibly radical change, far more than kind of org chart restructuring, and that's what we may see. And we may see some country somewhere in the world get it and everyone else copy it. I haven't seen that country. So I'd like to leave you, with the idea in mind of not just the wiki as a construct of technology, but this whole idea that anyone, the first billion people got on the internet via the PC. The next billion are getting on it via the mobile phone. And as Jimmy Wales pointed out yesterday, they're doing the same stuff as we all are doing. It's not, graphing back to the world we perceive of them, but rather the world they perceive of the internet. So, I lay out for all those who are going to be developing wikis that do public service, how are you going to cope with the radical changes that may well come on being at the other side of the chessboard on the information revolution? So I'll close with that and we'll move on to questions.
There's somebody there. Is it live?
Hi. 2 questions. One, are the presentations going to be available online?
Yes.
Good. The second question is the same as we asked Gabrielle yesterday from the UN, or previously with the UN. Is Diplopedia going to become available to other government agencies since it's an open source? I'm talking about the shell, not the content, obviously.
Was that Diplopedia you asked? I couldn't hear. Sorry.
Diplopedia.
Is the sort of the software that we use?
The template that you're using.
Oh yeah, we can give you that.
Okay.
Good to see you, Gura.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can learn more about some of those information. Not everything has been fully sort of pressed in terms of open source. One thing I should also mention is that other government agencies do have access to Diplopedia right now, actually. And there's read-only access through our intelligence community, the same platform, the ODNI platform. And there's also something at the State Department called the IT Transformational Initiative, which is really a whole mission approach to, thus far includes Foreign Agricultural Service and USAID. And so those folks that are on that sort of activity do have access to also contribute to Diplopedia if they have access to OpenNet. So as we look at ways to leverage technology, there's this opportunity for agencies to, I'm looking sort of at a talking point here, sorry, with this sort of smaller footprint to get on board and also participate in the same work that we do. So we do try to make information available to other federal agencies, also part of our mission.
I think we'll go left, and then we'll go to cyberspace for everyone after that.
Sure, thank you. I just actually have kind of a happy comment that your comments brought up. I was reading a book recently about the invention of the printing press, and one of the things that happened then that was unfortunate was that it split sort of the left and the right side of the brain. Because it became so much easier to print and cheaper just to print words, pictures fell away because astronomers had been drawing a lot of pictures and sort of dominated that area. And now we have this opportunity that humans long for pictures and words together. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity for us to get back to that. So get back to the 1600s before the printing press, because of economic reasons, made just lists and words and sort of linear thinking so much more typical, easy, and affordable. Now we have this chance to sort of reconcile the left and the right sides of the brain and the longing for pictures with words. And just as a boon to visual data and dashboards, I find when I talk to Hill staff, they really long for this, really user-friendly consolidated data and pictures. And just a comment on that. So thank you for bringing that up as a revolutionary idea.
Bob? Got somebody for us?
Yes, I chose this to start off with for the whole panel from Donna Osborne. Is there a need for a whole of government strategy for social media development, including wikis?
Can we do a show of hands? Is there a need for a whole of government strategy on? I think so. Sure. Yeah. Yes? Yes. I love yes/no questions. Oh.
We have a few more. There's one for Tiffany. What are some examples of public-private sector collaborations using wikis?
Good question.
That is a good question. So one example I would actually say is Wikipedia, that a number of people do actually collaborate from those different organizations and make sure that information is well represented there. So keeping in mind the conflict of interest policy. There are some other examples are ones that folks have mentioned in previous panels as well that have to do with sort of GSA has been doing a lot in that area. And I know there are some others too. You guys may know more. GSA, definitely. I think there is something also with energy that actually has to do, the private sector is invited into that conversation publicly, but I'm not exactly sure.
But that really is one of the, it's a grand challenge now because especially, with complex problems being the issue set of government agencies with the world shifting in so many different ways, you need to bring expertise from a lot of different fronts together now. And our current process of, well, let's hire you into the federal government, let's get you cleared if you need to be cleared, let's get you the credentialing to be part of our that doesn't really work. It works for people who are going to make long-term career contributions to the federal government. And you'll see this at the executive level. I mean, presidential transitions. They will call everybody and say, what does the new administration need to know about whatever? I mean, I still get requests for the five, I got asked to do, write a paper about what the Obama administration needs to think about for IT. I said, well, they need a CIO, but everyone's going to say that. What did I do? I just went to our computer science faculty and our electrical engineering faculty at Rice and said, what do you think's important? Wrote it up, turned it in. But that doesn't happen on a day-to-day basis with the federal government. It happens for the people at the very senior posts. And the people at the bottom can kind of reach out to their networks. But once again, it's that clay layer in the middle that isn't so receptive to that. And I think that is a grand challenge that I know a number of agencies have thought about and looked at. FBI is thinking about it now in a very serious way, how they can partner more with protecting the cyber resources of industry, and how do they actually not just be consumers for the information from those companies, but also share with them stuff that's useful and important to them. Anyway.
I also think this is it's a bit of a journey that we're on, and I think that we're kind of building upon various successes that people have had internally to kind of look at, okay, how can we do this externally? Some examples, not exactly wikis where the government is reaching out, but there's efforts like challenge.gov, where people are, government agencies can post challenges to the public sector to help the government out with challenges that the government is facing. I know there are various government agencies that are using innocentive.com to do the same approach. So there are these initial efforts, but I think a lot of it comes back to that where you're trying to work collaboratively. You have that high bar between, how do we get government working together with the public sector.
And if I actually could, I was just thinking a little bit more also about the social media strategy question, so I'm just going to jump in on that because I think this does tie in. Is actually this sense that when we think about digital strategy for all of government, it's actually in a lot of ways still similar to the way that our netizens interact on the internet, that sometimes we tend to roll out large policies. And we need to also, I think, respect the different sort of angles and topics, the same way that you guys were sort of talking about things. So the way that on the internet you have Wikipedia, but you also have Muppetpedia and Star Warspedia and Lostpedia. And all of those things really matter because they are really centralized and substantive around one space. And I think that's something that if you're thinking about strategy or you're thinking about the broad sweep of collaboration, it's worth discussing or considering. And did you have something else, Tom?
I would just speak to the point that they've recently issued a federal-wide digital strategy, and they are working on that, and that is and particularly focused on APIs, and I think every government agency will be required to provide APIs, and so they're the wider community, the wider internet, is using APIs and has done amazing things with infographics and from these APIs, and the government is increasingly trying to focus on making that information publicly available, and for others who have the time or the ability to make that information more useful and make us more and more transparent.
Yes, hi. One of the issues with Wikipedia is that the authors are all anonymous, and actually the ratio of people who edit to the users is small. But I'm seeing with your government pedias that you're using your own name and you're logging on people with their identities, and the ratio of editors and pages looks much better. So I wonder if you find what effect having identity has on your system versus the larger Wikipedia, and also the issue of what's the percentage of people making the decisions on the controversial pages? You have that issue that the larger Wikipedia has. Thanks.
So I think as I think Ryan mentioned in the previous presentation, you have the kind of the 99 and 1% rule with these social platforms, and I think that's pretty much what we've seen. Actually, Ryan's figures were a little bit better for GCpedia, and I think that's about the same type of interaction we've seen with Intellipedia and the internal wikis that we've had. I think it's absolutely critical for an internal wiki, for whether it be a business or for government, to have that transparency, to be where you can actually track down who is the contributor to various pages. And I think what it helps is in the cases that I've mentioned where my colleague who was about to retire, it gives him a legacy to capture his knowledge. It gives people it kind of enforces a bit of collegiality between people where you don't have we don't have a lot of the rant wars that you might have or edit wars on Wikipedia because again, it's tied to people's name, and people could kind of print out and say, did you see what this guy said? And then all of a sudden that becomes more of an issue. So that way, I think it's incredibly important to have that attribution capability. It also kind of cuts the other way is because some people are kind of reluctant to engage and reluctant to put their information out there because, well, geez, what if I put it out there and if it's wrong? then that's going to reflect poorly on me. So it cuts both ways, but I think it's absolutely critical, particularly in internal, especially for government, but I think also for business, any type of environment to have that attribution capability.
Yeah, I think, and I would agree with that. I think the other sort of angle on it is that I would also not necessarily conflate sort of the anonymity question with the activity question always. Part of it, I think, is that Wikipedia and other wikis and the public are primarily participated in by volunteers. And that's the gift, really, of those sort of systems. In the workplace, and our policy on Diplopedia is that it is voluntary, but it's related to work. So it's helping people do their jobs. And if you're getting paid to do your job and you want to do your job well because you're responsible to our citizens, then I think that that's something that really does come into play in terms of encouraging or really having something to back up why encouraging editing and contributing is worthwhile.
Tim's standing up, so that.
Well, I'd love to let this discussion go on for much, much longer.
Before he speaks
Unfortunately.
more, wait. I'm not yielding my time yet.
All right.
I think we all should thank Tim. He's the managerial organizational monster who makes this work every time. So,
Thank you, Chris. But as Tiffany says, there's a team behind all that. And actually, if you see people have, the orange stripe on their badge, they're all from the Office of eDiplomacy, and it really is a team effort. So thanks to all of them. There's many in the audience, many behind the curtain, others out there. So if you see them, say thank you to them as well, because they really have done this work. So thank you. As I said, this discussion could go on for a long time. Thanks to our panel. I think it's just been fantastic. I certainly appreciate all of you taking the time and effort to come here. It is not easy, as you can all well imagine. We all have to get approvals from different government agencies, but it's been a very open, frank, candid discussion, and that is very useful. Thank you. This is the end of Tech at State. I want to say thank you to Wikimania 2012 for letting us be part of Wikimania. As Chris said, they're pretty amazing events, and as you can see throughout the rest of this building, it brings in people from all around the world, and for us to be part of that was really something fantastic for Tech at State, and we're very grateful to Wikimania 2012, and especially to Tiffany. She told you a little bit that she was the link. I should say a little bit more. She was not just the link. She's actually the program coordinator for the entire conference. So we have her on duty until about now, and I'm going to have to release her. She's going to take off her state hat and now go back to work with the Wikimania. But she's been working hard for many, many hours, and so special thanks to you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Okay, the only thing I'll say is we can keep this discussion going. If you go to tech.state.gov, it's a Ning site. You can join the Tech at State community. I would invite you to do that, those of you who are in the room, those of you who are listening to us online. And please add in any contributions. We will put up the presentations. We have live streamed and recorded all of the video. That will also go up onto tech.state.gov. And with that, I will say thanks all of you for participating. It is wonderful. It's a bit of work to put these events on, but if you don't come to them, they don't mean anything to anyone. So thank you for coming, and I look forward to seeing all of you at the next Tech at State.